For some people, it's everything or nothing when it comes to graphics. Either you make the game look nice, or you disable everything to make it run as quickly as you can. But do you even know what sort of difference turning down these settings is making to your frame rate and graphics quality? For all of this video, I tested my settings on Mr. Yeelectical's excellent benchmarking map, which you can download for yourself in the description of this video. I hate to add lots of disclaimers to my videos, but this needs one since everybody's PC is so different. I can only go by what my two main PCs did, and what dictated my frame rate largely depended on which resolution I was playing at. If you have an equally powerful CPU and GPU, the higher your resolution, the more likely your PC is of being GPU limited. If you have an uber fast graphics card and a slow processor, you might find very little difference between resolutions. And if you have a slow graphics card, lowering your resolution will significantly boost frame rates. There's an easy way of telling whether my settings were CPU or GPU limited. I disabled multi-core rendering and saw how much the frame rates dropped by. When my PC was GPU limited, my frame rate would drop by 9%. When kind of balanced, 26%, and when CPU limited, it dropped by as much as 39%. I found I was always better off with this enabled, which makes sense because both of my PCs have 4 cores. Since I record videos for you, I want my videos to look as pretty as possible, so I usually play with these settings. I tested how much of a difference it would make if I changed each of these and turned to their lowest values. When GPU limited, turning down anti-aliasing and shadows improved the frame rate the most, followed by shader detail. The rest didn't matter that much. When CPU limited, turning down shaders and shadows still improved frame rate. Interestingly, anti-aliasing no longer made any difference at all. If you play on a low resolution, don't be afraid to turn up anti-aliasing a bit. No, go on, don't be shy. In moderation, it won't be bad for you at all. You won't get addicted. That's good. Just a bit more. Further. Further. Ah, now you've wrecked your frame rate. Well done. Now it's time to investigate the individual settings in more depth so that you too know exactly what's in your CSGO when you bite into it. You may have noticed that my default graphics settings have all of these bottom options disabled. There's a reason for this. VSync deliberately limits frame rate. Fast approximate anti-aliasing is a post-process effect, meaning that it adds nothing to the graphics detail and only blurs what's there. And motion blur also makes it harder to see, particularly when you need to. And in case you need extra persuasion, regardless of whether my PC was GPU or CPU limited, motion blur and fast approximate anti-aliasing both slowed my PC down by almost 10% each. You can see that they drag my frame rate far below that of my normal gaming settings, shown here, just in case you've forgotten how many graphics options I already have enabled. Texture detail. Perhaps my most surprising discovery was how little the texture detail mattered. Having this set to high drastically improved the quality of the graphics, yet only reduced frame rates by up to 2%. So I recommend keeping it on high settings. Anisotropic filtering should also be left at 16 times. If set to a low value, textures will look blurry when viewed side on, even if texture detail is set to high. Which leaves shadow, anti-aliasing and shader quality, which I benchmarked at all settings to see how much we could get away with. Anti-aliasing. My ATI graphics card supported 2, 4 and 8 times MSAA. My Nvidia one also supports CSAA, which they claim offers better quality at the same frame rate. But my results for 8 and 16 times were exactly the same quality and frame rate as 4 times MSAA, and 16 times Q was the same as 8 times MSAA. In other words, you might as well just be using the standard multi-sampling anti-aliasing options. At normal HD resolutions, both cards dropped off by similar amounts until they reached 8 times, where I then found AMD to be more efficient. As I said earlier, you won't see as much of a drop at lower resolutions. It also makes sense that the impact is greater at higher resolutions. I only tested 4K on my Nvidia card and found that beyond 4 times anti-aliasing, my frame rate would be severely impacted. Treat anti-aliasing as a luxury, but if you really can't stand jagged edges, then consider 4 times multi-sampling anti-aliasing to be the sweet spot. If you're silly like me and you're gaming at 4K, then you only need 2 times or even FXAA for it to be acceptable, but I wouldn't recommend the latter in any other situation. Shadows. On both cards, there was no point in going for very low when low looked better and offered nearly the same performance. Medium and high both affected frame rates quite a bit. If I had to choose between the two, I'd personally choose high, given how much better it looks. Shaders. Low and medium performed almost identically, as did high and very high. A bit like with shadows, I don't see any point in using anything other than the highest or third highest setting. Resolution. If you have a balanced PC system, lowering the resolution will probably make the biggest change to your frame rate, and I suspect it's the reason that people find they play better when using old-fashioned 4x3 resolutions and stuff. I've already covered this in a previous video, but even if you're already getting perhaps 200 frames a second, getting 400 FPS on a low resolution will still make the game feel smoother. Don't argue about this. Just accept it. And this is coming from somebody who still plays at higher resolutions. What I didn't expect to find was the difference between full screen and full screen windowed settings. I prefer windowed because it's easier to switch between the game and the desktop, but it comes at two downsides. Firstly, the game's brightness is stuck at your desktop settings. And secondly, it lowers your frame rate. I can't make sense of the numbers. At 4K, my Nvidia card ran 8% slower when windowed. At Full HD, Nvidia ran 17% slower and AMD only by 6% when windowed. This drop was reduced when running at low settings, hence making it more CPU limited. And to screw everything up, my Nvidia card actually ran faster when in windowed mode and with my desktop running at 1024 by 768. And this wasn't just a one-off thing. I ran the test several times and got the same results. Long story short, it makes a difference, but you'll just have to try it for yourself and to see what works best for you. In conclusion, to get the best compromise between frame rate and quality, run the game at lowest everything, but keep multi-core support enabled and textures and anisotropic filtering set to high, with as much anti-aliasing as your graphics card lets you get away with. Which you'll probably want at potato resolutions.